Running Man, Running Man, Running Man will change your life. Running Man, Running Man, Running Man will save your child and wife. Running Man, for a $1 billion prize. Running Man, if they don't record you, you'll survive. The Running Man was written and directed by Edgar Wright, who did Hot Fuzz, as well as Shaun of the Dead, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Baby Driver, as well as one of my favorite movies of the last decade, Last Night in Soho. So much so that I even got the goddamn shirt. Last Night in Soho, my favorite movie of 2021, by the way. Sure, it was a bit of a lean year for me reviewing stuff, but that being said, when I saw that the director of this and the aforementioned other films, including The World's End, that I really wasn't the biggest fan of, I was like, all right, Edgar Wright, doing a different spin on The Running Man. Admittedly, the 1987 version, I'm going to put this down right here, my arm's getting tired. But anyway, The Running Man was a Stephen King novel that apparently the 1987 version decided we're just not going to listen to that. And we're just going to do our own thing. We're going to have Arnie being Arnie. We're going to have some fun 80s cheese. And it's also like a breezy 100 minutes where Arnie says, I'm going to reach my hand up your and break out down spine. So instead of Arnie, we get Glenn Powell as Ben Richards. So at least they kept the same name. I can't fault them right there. Also, there is another writer for this, Michael Bacall. Not related to Lauren Bacall, at least I hope not, because he was Perry in Free Willy. Yes, that guy. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I'd feel so free, and Ben Richards wants to save his daughter, and who could save her? Well, it'll actually be Ben Richards, if he can survive 30 days with everybody in whatever dystopian setting this is, Slum City, and all other parts that apparently include Derry, Maine, of all things. Yeah, if he can survive that, he will be totally goddamn fine. By the way, the Derry Maine thing is not a spoiler. It is not tied into it. As hilarious as it would have been to have Pennywise involved in this, I just think, basically, Stephen King has to include Derry Maine in about any of his, novellas. I actually don't know if he calls it a novella, but nevertheless, $110 million budget, and Glenn Powell, yes, from Anyone But You, as well as Top Gun Maverick, as well as Hitman, and really is a terrifically likable guy. In interviews, he works hard. He really is one of the hardest working men in show business currently. He is one of the it guys. He has a great look. He has an inordinate amount of charisma. I was only going to say an inaudible amount of charisma, but that's not the correct word. He just has this presence that makes you want to cheer for him, makes you want to watch his movies, and really, Glenn is a more than capable actor, so him being cast as Ben Richards wasn't the worst thing, but that's pretty much it. There are a few tweaks from the 1987 Running Man. This is a little more towards the book to an extent. I'm not going to compare and contrast, the stuff of the book and everything, but those that have read it more recently say that this is closer to it, even with the tweaks. We do have Emilia Jones. We also have Coleman Domingo having a fucking blast as Bobby, the game show host. And really, Coleman Domingo, after Sing Sing, and I mean after other roles, but especially Sing Sing, I want that man to have every goddamn opportunity to shine and show what he can do. Katie O'Brien, yes, have Miss O'Brien on as many projects as you want, because I will watch just about anything she's in. Katie O'Brien, fantastic, humorous, was great in Love Lies Bleeding. She's been great even in projects that weren't all that great. It was nice to see her include in the last couple installments of the Mission Impossible franchise. And in all honesty, seeing her in this as Laughlin was really, really nice. And Michael Cera is also in this. William H. Macy, Josh Brolin as Killian. And we even have Jamie Lawson, the terrific, gifted Jamie Lawson. Really wish her role had been expanded upon a little bit more. And we do get a bit of backstory on Ben and how Ben came to be. We don't just have Arnie as, Ben doing all the stuff and everything and getting locked into the Running Man game within a little bit. leading this revolution or whatever the hell he's doing, looking out for his own stuff. All this weird, dystopian stuff that's going on. This is set in 2025, by the way. The 1987 one was set in 2017. And we basically get a little bit of backstory that Ben's daughter is sick, and he's bound and determined to find a way to get money. He has had jobs, but unfortunately, due to both anger issues and a willingness to help people and the downtrodden, he has ended up kind of on getting the short end of the stick. And then he is presented basically with an opportunity to save his daughter and to also save his wife, who's having to work oodles and oodles and oodles of hours. And it would be very exhausting, especially when you have a kid. Perhaps you don't have a kid in the dystopian future, but that's another story for another day. We also mainly go almost Hunger Games style, kind of setting this thing up for a little bit. I mean, we don't go as long setting stuff up like they did in the first Hunger Games. I mean, really, they set that shit up for a while. Like a while to the point where I'm like, wasn't this called the Hunger Games? Aren't we supposed to have the odds forever in our favor? But we get introduced to the rules, and basically you survive for 30 days, you get a $1 billion prize, and there are even little perks. Those that record you end up being able to, if they're able to bust you, or lead to your capture, or your eventual execution, which is the whole point of this. Nobody has won. One person survived 29 days in season 1. That'll be something to remember a little bit later on. But basically, we have a guy named Tim. We have Katie O'Brien playing Laughlin, and we have Ben played by Glenn Powell. They're all doing their own things, and you get more prizes if more cash prizes every time you succeed with a day. You get bonuses, that kind of stuff. You even get security to watch your loved ones, so people will make sure that you are okay and that you are not going to end up on the wrong side of things. No shadow people like in Last Night in Soho. That was about the only thing that I thought looked a little bit questionable, but what didn't look questionable was Miss Anya Taylor-Joy. Who also doesn't look questionable is Miss Katie O'Brien, who they lean into the fact at least that she's gay. That's good. I mean, it's called acting for a reason, but it's nice that they're embracing that. And Coleman Domingo, flamboyant but having fun, but also just really enjoying himself. Like overall, you can tell, you can just feel the physical, enjoyment. Just the aura. I hate to use that word because it's been so fucking overdone, but there's an aura about that man, and there's an aura about Glenn Powell, who does have a likability and also is willing to basically say, "Yeah, I'm doing this for my kid, but I'm gonna fuck shit up if I get a chance because I'm gonna win this stuff." And when he auditioned, they said, "You are quantifiably the angriest person who's ever auditioned for our show." That just really pisses me off. And we get some stuff with friends of his as he is trying to basically survive. And bingo bango, we have the Running Man. There we are. We have the Running Man done by Edgar Wright. And considering that Edgar Wright has had a pretty damn good track record, in all honesty, of all those movies I listed, really The World's End is about the only stumble. Baby Driver is something I need to go back and rewatch. I do actually need to go rewatch Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. I remember really enjoying them and doing retro reviews for those. And the same with Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, that had a great cast and, my God, a bevy of beautiful women. So there we go. Baby Driver, really, really terrific. There's a reason why that thing got award consideration and all the accolades. And Last Night in Soho, aforementioned, my favorite movie of 2021. So, this one's, it's okay at first. Unfortunately, Glenn Powell's star power and the likability of Coleman Domingo and the tweaks and everything can only carry this movie so far. When the first one was about 100 minutes, something like that. This is about 2 hours and 10 minutes. It feels way longer in parts. There's expansion on things which I liked, but there's also unnecessary padding. And that's actually my biggest problem with this movie. It unfortunately ends up feeling so dragged out that even when things ramp up in the third act and you're like, okay, things are we're just doing this and we're just throwing stuff at people, stuff that we already kind of figured out. There's a character that gets introduced that feels like she's from a totally different movie. I kind of probably spoiled who it was. But it doesn't feel so much like there's a flow of the story. It feels like Edgar's like, okay, I'm going to take certain parts And I'm going to sew them together with not a lot of running, oddly enough. Not a lot of running on the Running Man. Some driving, some hiding, quite a bit of hiding. It does give Glenn a chance to play dress up like he did in The Hitman. I guess this is a bigger, well, this is better than The Hitman. I don't know if it's a bigger budget because The Hitman actually did cost quite a bit. But for the $110 million, they didn't get a whole lot. Like, they had lavish sets. They had some cool action moments, but there's no bite to it. It feels toothless. It feels like it is just barely chugging along. And that's very disappointing for an Edgar Wright movie, given his aforementioned filmography. I like how, they had William H. Macy in it. I like how Glenn Powell was just, unwilling to give up, but he also was humanized because he wanted to protect his family. It wasn't just about him wanting to take down the system. He wanted to protect his family. So that's okay. I respect that part right there. But it also takes a lot of that stuff and throws it out the window. The villains are terrible, by the way. Josh Brolin, by the way, this isn't really a spoiler, being the runner of this whole goddamn thing, ironically, is a very good actor. He's just not given much to do here. Coleman Domingo is very fun. There's hunters and everything, and there's there are a lot of people, trying to do the killing, a lot of people screaming and pointing. And then they try to get to the whole thing where it's like, the Richards lives thing, which they did in the first one, and I think felt a little bit, I don't want to say it felt organic, but it didn't feel like they were beating us over the head with it, and that's kind of the thing. It's like they had to spoon feed people. And the conclusion also is simultaneously so rushed and unearned. I didn't like this film, especially after halfway through. Like, I didn't mind parts of it, but there were parts that could have been cut down, way cut down. This should have been 1 hour and 50 minutes maximum. And from there, we basically just have a remake that will probably make some money, but I don't know, putting this in theaters like a week before Wicked for Good. I mean, granted, this is R-rated, that's PG, but this is going to get swallowed up as far as showtimes and everything, because people know Wicked for Good is going to make a lot of money. So I really hope that this movie doesn't turn people off from checking out future Edgar Wright projects. And Glenn Powell, again, very good lead, but god damn it. There are things that annoyed me in this movie, some of which I'll talk about. But yeah, I'm going to get into spoilers, so that's a bit of a long, part to get to the spoiler section, but there we go. We are here. Spoilers now. So, if we've got the, if we've got the, cash, if you've got the balls. And when the stakes go up, the shit goes down. And shit really started to go down here pretty quickly. There's also a guy that's kind of, going into the whole deep fakes thing that shows up later on, that's doing his own videos, that has his own compound, his own room where he's doing that stuff and talking about all the people that won and all, or all the people that came close to winning and how they're doing the stuff. And really, it's all ratings driven. And that's the thing about the first one, is you understood the network controlling everything and having the ratings and that kind of stuff. And it felt like there were more stakes. It felt like that actually was, even though it was 80s, it was a little more like, oh, this could happen. This feels very formulaic. Like, it doesn't really feel like a live studio. It doesn't feel like a live studio audience, even though Coleman is doing his best. We do get introduced to Katie O'Brien soon after Glenn basically is trying to get his job back, and it was insubordination because he saved people instead of doing his job. He didn't see people necessarily as, disposable like his boss did. And because he's desperate for the money, he vowed to his wife he wouldn't do that stuff. He basically said, I got to do the Running Man because he's got to earn a whole bunch of money. He saw this spinning wheel thing, like a giant hamster wheel where he answers stuff and you could be good. And he actually would have been good for the cardio, but he wouldn't have been able to earn all that much. This is basically a way for him to take care of, his wife and child. But he's also going to take care of other people because as he's getting money, it's being deposited in his account. This one security guy is watching him, or watching them. Laughlin, by the way, Katie O'Brien, unfortunately, gets kind of nerfed here. And I know it's called The Running Man, but if you're going to have an unnecessarily long run time and you're not going to have a lot of... You could do a little bit more with Katie. We do see her partying later, and then we see her flamethrowered by a couple guys or kids in a barn. So there you go with that. Tim is way too high on the goddamn hog and ends up getting shot when he basically blurts out that he's on the show instead of going into hiding. And that's what Ben's basically trying to do. He also must make sure that he records 10 minutes of footage every single day, sends a tape in a hermetically sealed envelope that Johnny Carson then divines and reads and everything as Karnak the Magnificent, in case I didn't spell the gag out for you enough, or in case you're under my age and you're not 1 foot in a grave. And even Carson was very much before my time, because Carson was done in 1992 and I was 11, and I didn't appreciate Carson as much until I go back and rewatch his stuff. And so basically the theme of this for the citizens is record, report, reward. And it's 10,000 if you kill people. It's 10,000 if other people die. But it's 100,000 if you kill the hunters. And there's like 6 hunters. And the thing is in the other one, we had a little bit of an idea of what the hunters had characters. The hunters don't have characters here. There's McCone, but it's so obvious who he is because they keep hammering the whole thing home about season 1 that he doesn't really feel like much of a character. So yeah, you don't have the ice skating, a former pro wrestler that was in the first one. You don't have the guy that had the electrical, stuff and everything. You don't have any characters in this. You don't have the attempted SR scene like you had in the original Running Man. But you don't really have anybody put in particular danger or peril. Like, you see violence happening, but none of it really registers. And William H. Macy plays a character named Molly, who knows him really well and will do a bunch of stuff for him. Not like that, you sickos, I run a clean show. And basically will give him passports, give him ID cards, that kind of stuff. And he will find a way to get on the run and costumes, such as him wearing a mustache and everything and a weird haircut that made him look like he should hail a cab to get out of Germany. But unfortunately, it turns out that had he not taken the Running Man, he would have gotten this job with William H. Macy and been able to work with that, selling these underground goods. And guess what? It would have worked out totally fine. By the way, every time he gets near somebody, they get tracked. Why are they getting tracked? Because he got a little watch that basically says, oh, send in your tape, or here's your money, or all this. And there's these weird orbs tracking him, and these hunters that have no personality or discernible, characteristics about them. William H. Macy ends up getting killed, and then we find out more about Ben just trying to do stuff for his family. He's worried about his wife. I'd be worried too if I was, around Jamie Lawson and suddenly I wasn't around her, because you protect a woman like that. But every time he basically continues to survive, he, is like, I'm still here, you shit eaters. Almost said shit heads. And he ends up going to a lavish hotel. He's doing fine, but he gets rat out, so to speak, and he has to get out of there. He reserves his room for another few days, thinking that nobody will find him. He ends up going into the slum area, where now he's got to mail his tapes, but there's a lot of weird people. But it turns out that one of the people that's shouting on the streets is actually one of the goddamn hunters. And again, not really put in danger. It's a slum apartment straight out of Gotham City that begins with the letter Y. And at one point, Glenn, in a towel, because he was going to go take a shower, but then the people came in, he's climbing out the window trying to climb back into his apartment. And, the Y starts falling. He's like, oh, Y. See, that's about the level of jokes we get in this, which is really disappointing for Edgar Wright movies. So I'm bound and determined to believe this has studio interference written all over it. Everybody's allowed to make a bad movie, but there's no way that jokes like that would have gotten by, great writers like this, great filmmakers. So, nevertheless, skipping over some of this stuff, because it's both busy, but there's not a lot going on, because it's really just him running occasionally, but mostly just hiding. Had it been called The Hiding Man, it wouldn't have necessarily worked. But as Tim basically gets offed, we cut to Coleman Domingo's Bobby, and he's talking about all the evil stuff these people have done. And they do the deep fake stuff where it's like, okay, now we have the technology, the AI, that kind of stuff to make it seem like people are saying things that they really aren't saying, but real people can still see through it. People with fucking brains can see through it. And AI, by the way, mostly looks like shit. And any of the stuff that's really, really good, hate to say it, is a waste of fucking resources. We're going to poison the goddamn planet with all our use of AI, you morons. That's why I get irritated with Google giving me the AI overview. I'm like, I don't want to use AI. But that being said, he's trying to basically escape. He's escaping from people, but this is almost limping along, and stumbling into its second half. And then he ends up running into a kid that I swear to God was fooled in another life from the people under the stairs. And I'm not... seriously, I thought it was a clone of the goddamn kid. It was amazing. I expected Ving Rhames to show up with one of those hats. I don't know what they call it. But he has a big brother or a cousin or possibly just a familiar. It's like a giant gargoyle that sits on your shoulder and crushes you. That does the deepfake videos and all that. And if I'm missing the names of some of these characters, it's because I don't really honestly care. I felt like the inclusion of a lot of these characters it was neat until they basically just kept screwing it up and screwing up the pacing. There were things that could have been cut. There were a number of minutes that could have been cut off of that goddamn thing. I hate to say it. I think you could have cut out the towel bit. You could have cut out certain things and shrunk the runtime a little bit, because then at least it would have been over quicker. I probably would have been a lot more positive to this movie. But he basically is being set up with he's going to be set up with a contact in Derry, Maine, with a man named Elton, who's played by Michael Cera. But first, they got to get out of, this slummy part of the city, wherever it is. It's not Sin City. We don't have any gorgeous women in black and white. Yeah, that's all I remember about Sin City. That Mickey Rourke's face looking like it was literally Clayface. Moving away from Sin City and back to Slum City, or wherever the fuck this is, we get a driving scene where he basically is trying to get in the trunk, is trying to get away from some motorcycle guys. And he's been doing his tapes, but he really is starting to feel the pinch. But the reason that he's conveniently not died is because the ratings are very, very high. Because Killian can spot talent. So he ends up getting to Derry, Maine. Katie O'Brien gets killed, unfortunately. Blast it. Would have loved to have seen Katie O'Brien make it to the end. He gets to Derry, Maine. He talks to Michael Cera's Elton. And this is where the thing really just grinds to a halt, because it's deeply unfunny stuff with him and his grandmother, aunt, whatever the fuck, that really looks like the human embodiment of, I'm watching you, Wazowski. And for those that have seen the movie, now you'll never unsee it. And if you're watching this because you want to know everything and you haven't seen the movie yet, you'll see what I mean. So they're going to set up all this stuff. We give a backstory to Elton about how he was part of He had a dad that was a hot dog vendor that was trying to help people, but was against the system and fighting the system and this kind of stuff. And this didn't necessarily work for me, because there was like one funny gag in this entire sequence, and it went really long, or at least it felt like it went long. We get them basically, setting stuff up. There's explosives, because, William H. Macy's Molly had a bunch of explosives, but Elton has a bunch of them, and he's going to basically take out these hunters and these bad people because of what they did. And the aunt grandmother sees him, is like, all this stuff. And by the way, every house, apparently even in Derry, Maine, is retrofitted with a switch that you can hit and you can call the authorities and they can just pop up out of nowhere. And Michael Cera wants that because he wants to basically get rid of all these people for what they did to his dad. And then we get a long, drawn-out chase scene of... We get him like using a super soaker-like thing to fry people where the floor is electrified, and a lot of this stuff just feels like it feels like it belongs in this movie, but it also feels like it's different from the movie that they've been showing. Because anytime they spark up with the fun, we're like, why haven't we been doing more of this? Because it's not hitting. Like, it's so bone serious with the family stuff, and then it goes to something like this, and it's clashing because Edgar Wright is just off his goddamn game. Then they end up escaping through the caves. The main, or one of the main hunter guys, ends up stabbing Michael Cera, but then he ends up slashing his Achilles, and suddenly this weird ball camera thing comes down, and basically Ben is going to end up having to off this this hunter, and basically every hunter he offs another 100,000, and you're going to basically do this. If you do this, I'm going to give you carte blanche. I will give you your own show. And you can do this because he's making it like, oh, you know, I'm fearful of this guy, so I got to keep him under my thumb. But the thing is Killian doesn't really feel like much of a villain here in this show. The government control isn't really that good because they're kind of idiots. I know it's about fear and stuff like that, but still, there's not really a lot of fear to be had in this dystopian future or dystopian setting. But nevertheless, he doesn't do that. He ends up basically getting Michael Cera in a vehicle, and Michael Cera's got a bunch of like sticks of dynamite and everything, light the fuse, break the boom dynamite. And we see what happens when, well, you know, gut shot meet head shot. He's racing towards a guy that has a bad Achilles, a cut Achilles, so I don't really understand how he's driving or how he got into that vehicle. But he runs into him, explosion, falls in a river, and now is basically just stumbling and trying to get over the Canadian border. And then runs into a lady played by Amelia Jones, and they called her Amelia with an A. I guess because they maybe thought that she wasn't going to know another name. I don't understand. Whatever. But it's fine. It's fine. But this is where the movie just doesn't know what the fuck it wants to be. Because it's done all this stuff about him fighting the system, him trying to save his family. And then he just starts beating her over the goddamn head with a bunch of exposition. Oh, how much did your scarf cost? It's like probably, you know, more than my daughter's medicine would have been and this kind of stuff. And oh, you can't drive a car, this kind of stuff. And after he busts into her vehicle, and yes, he's probably frustrated at people that have more than him because he's been fighting so much. But there's nothing wrong with this. Nothing wrong with this person. And the worst part of it, she ends up basically helping him driving backwards on the freeway, you know, right before the right before we go to goddamn Canada, like the overpass, I think, just before we go to Canada, that's running east and west. And she's supposed to get to this, like, you know, this area with this compound, so that Michael Cera's dad had. It was a bunker, so he can just hide out there for a while. But then she unwittingly becomes his hostage, or decides to willingly help him. It's so messy and everything because she realizes he's not actually that bad of a guy. It's all rushed very quickly. Despite this movie grinding to a halt multiple times, we do this. Goes through a blockade, and basically there are people saying, Richards lives. And he lives, but then he's basically doing this stuff. It's so ridiculous and moronic. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then basically, I guess makes sense is a little bit wrong, but just it feels like it's trying to honor the original material and have fun like the 87 version without understanding how to, which is unusual for Edgar Wright, who is known for making movies that can be serious and fun. Baby Driver's an example. It's got sad moments, but it's got some great car chases. So they do the blockade thing, and he pretends to have this explosive, and he gets on this like stealth jet. And basically it turns out that everybody on the plane is a bunch of hunters. And then footage is shown of his wife and child being killed. But, of course, this is a deep fake, by the way, just so you know. And now the idea is, Lacone has been totally unmasked. The guy and everything that was the main hunter. Because it turns out he was actually the season 1 finalist and was given the same opportunity that Ben was to basically be the leader of the hunters. And yeah, you may not know your family, but you're going to be able to take care of them. You're going to be able to do this. And the only way out is in a pine box or an urn or whatever. And yeah, because I just felt like that was a little unnecessary because I didn't care about that character, and I still don't. And then we basically get a shootout on the goddamn plane while Amelia is there. And this hunter guy, this main hunter guy, does that, and is explaining about all this, and it looks like he's about to take care of Ben, but then he ends up getting sucked out the goddamn door. Well, almost. He ends up getting his parachute sucked out there, so there's one parachute left. The other pilots that are hunters are dead, and Ben ends up killing him. Ben ends up also rescuing Amelia, sending her down and everything. She's going to be okay, I guess. And she's got all these pamphlets that Elton had, Michael Cera's character had, because we just need to go with more of this stuff. I don't know what the point of this is, because it's dragging at this point. I mean, I'm going way longer than I planned, but there are just so many frustrating things about this movie. And basically, the plane ends up hitting the building and destroying the stuff. But actually, that wasn't the case, because the deepfake guy comes out and does this. And, well, we don't know if he's still alive or whatever, but here's a big thing. So, earlier there was something about the kid's sock. And he had the kid's sock in his pocket. And I forgot to mention that early on, but whatever. I mean, if you're watching it to this point with the spoiler section, then you know. But we see sometime later, the wife and kid are very much alive, shopping. And it turns out that he not only got his prize, but also bought some socks. And then she sees him, and then he leads a revolution instantly it's a montage of him leading people and destroying the set, and basically, destroying all this stuff, and he's going to end up killing Killian, and then, we're live, or whatever the fuck the final thing was. Because way before this, I was checked out. And we smash cut the credits, shoot 'em up style, or rock and roll style. I don't know what this is supposed to be, but it's like, had it been, again, a nice tight hour and 50 minutes, had it even been an hour and 45, you could have still done different things, and cut just certain scenes down in half, and it would have been fine. Unfortunately, the running man just ends up stumbling and shattering both of its goddamn legs, or shattering its leg like Carrie Strug, and then trying to do a trick again, and then never recovering fully. But yeah, that's all I gotta say about that. It gets an F. It's not good. The running man is not good. So agree, disagree with what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Wright, until we run somewhere other than here again, happy trails to you.